Another formulation, similar to the Philosophia Perennis, is found explicit or implied in alchemical traditions East and West, and alchemy primordiale. This tradition, it is proposed, is as old as the taming of fire, with roots symbolically in primordial black soils, the deepest layers. A tradition of homo faber, it gathers metaphors from the crafts, with metalworking central, but stoneworking before that, and presents itself as the great work. Its ethos is vocational. The thing that characterizes this perspective is that the cosmos itself, creation, nature, is the sacred text, the first revelation. It is much older than written text, and much older than religions. In this, it is typically emanationist and sensitive above all to cycles, great and small, and dwells on narratives of cosmic decline and rejuvenation. Salvation is metamorphic. Its metaphysics is radically non-dual. We can detect this tradition in all its forms, wherever there is ambivalence between nature and art, the living and the crafted, because the alchemy primordiale makes no such original distinction, nor any distinction between matter and spirit. It proclaims a coincidentia oppositorum. The various historical alchemies all claim to continue this exceedingly ancient tradition, the secrets of which are, as it were, written in our bones. We can work out all the details of the Platonic year from Plato's nuptial number, his most opaque mathematical puzzle. The full cycle of unseasonable marriage, which is also the decline of political constitutions, extends for exactly 12,960,000 days, or 480,000 months of 27 days, or 360,000 years of 360 days, or however else you would like to divide it up. It amounts to a mere 500 generations of 72 years each, 500 times 72 times 360. The questions for the Platonist when he wakes up in the morning to face his predicament are, what generation am I among, and what day is this, under which of those 480,000 moons, in which of those 500 cohorts? It is only when we know the prevailing tides that we can act accordingly and wisely. This is the whole premise of the Chinese Book of Changes, the I Ching too, a book of statecraft that also plots unseasonable marriage over a fixed cycle of symbolic time. Just as the Chinese tradition is bifurcated, with a very esoteric Taoism and a very externalist Confucianism, inner and outer, were similarly, but not so neatly bifurcated in the Western tradition. Christianity has an inherently internal perspective, while Rabbinic Judaism, because it is rabbinic and not priestly, is an externalism. Yet, perforce, Christianity became an externalism, an esotericism that built a civilization, while Judaism was the source of the esoteric, Kabbalah, and the occult. The rupture of Second Temple Judaism in the 1st century AD was a profound complication rather than a settlement. Casting a broad eye over the Islamic Hadith literature, what stands out is the extraordinary care with which the narratives of the night journey have been preserved. They go against the whole trend of the literature, which generally prefers to defend the Prophet from accusations of sorcery, and for the most part avoids supernatural feats. But every word of the story of the night journey is well attested. This tells us, for a start, the considerations other than cold, horizontal historicity were crucial in the formation of the Hadith canon. There were pneumatic criteria. The British Empire reshaped the geopolitical landscape in ways we still fail to appreciate. Not only did the British invent India, in many respects they created Hinduism too. Even more, there are ways in which they reinvented Buddhism as well. This is nothing, of course, to how they reshaped Judaism and the political geography of the Middle East. In the case of Islam, they installed the Wahhabis. And they did something else. They invented the Arabs. Just as the diverse people of the Indian subcontinent had never thought of themselves as a single entity, the diverse ethnic and tribal groups of the Middle East had never thought of themselves as a distinct people. The British crafted and fostered this identity to thwart the Ottoman Turks and advance their interests in oil-rich lands. They stirred Arab nationalism and pan-Arabism and promoted the idea that Arabic speakers are all one. This is largely a confection. Many of the Arabs of the Levant and Palestine, for instance, have Greek roots. The Arab Brotherhood and the Arab Street are largely political myths. We wonder why the Arabs cannot form a united front. It's because their self-identity, no less than the international borders drawn on maps in London, is warped by post-colonial falsehoods. The Gospel of Barnabas is the tip of what iceberg? Leaving aside its Islamic overwriting, the answer is that it reflects an ancient but errant cult of John the Baptist that the Crusaders encountered in the Holy Land. The feature of this cult was an esoteric and initiatory doctrine of adult baptism. It is best described as Jewish Christian, since John was of the Old Covenant, not the New. It venerated Elijah. It was associated with the name and traditions of Barnabas. It was absorbed by the primitive Carmelites and other groups and leaked into Europe through these channels. But it was already established in Europe as a secret tradition in certain powerful families, notably the Colonna, and was specifically an undercurrent in the Milanese church. It diverged from orthodoxy on matters concerning infant baptism, confirmation, and the catechumenate. The heresy was exposed and suppressed during the vicissitudes of the Catholic Reformation. Why study the Voynich manuscript? Because it is a lump of gristle that the entire intellectual order of modernity cannot digest. Because it presents a pre-modern cosmology that the modern mind is unable to understand. Because it exposes the narrow frame and limitations of the experts. Because it defies their paradigm and laughs at their assumptions. Because it's an embarrassment. Because it's a Rorschach test in which the entire bizarre degeneracy of modern intellectual culture sees its delusions. But mainly because it is the only surviving text that offers a comprehensive presentation of what the author takes to be an ancient astrobotany. We do not have an extant ancient account of the relation between plants and the heavens. There are only residues of it in European herbalism. The Voynich manuscript is evidently a late medieval attempt to place the plant world within a traditional cosmological framework. If there is one thing that could help set the world aright, it is the normalisation of prayer beads. Why, on a plane or on a bus journey, are there not people running prayer beads through their fingers? There are in some corners of the world, but not in the West. The single greatest difference between traditional and modern man is that traditional man prays, but modern man does not. Normalise prayer beads, any beads, any prayer, any god, the rosary or the mala or the tesbih, a secular affirmation if you must. Prayer beads should be standard accoutrement in times such as these. Our society could be greatly improved if it was normal for people to fill their empty moments, or their fraught moments, with the gentle habit of counting prayers on beads. It's a good place to begin. In his exposition of the political constitutions, Roger Sauter draws out an implicit scheme of 64 possible interactions between the four castes. States inevitably decline as those possibilities are exhausted. Sauter does not explore the connection in his writings, but I know he was aware of it. This is the same structure found in the Chinese classic of statecraft, the I Ching. It is common to say that the Platonic, with its forms, is at odds with the far more Heraclitean Asiatic traditions, where the emphasis is on change. But there are deep and often exact consonances between Plato and ancient Chinese thought. Understanding these and recovering a common archaic heritage will be an important task in the future. Sauter's approach to Plato is particularly useful in this respect, and in unexpected ways. Steiner provides an insightfully Platonic diagnosis for the modern political crisis. Man is a tripartite being, intellectual, emotional, physical, head, heart and hand, and the state is man writ large. There are three spheres of life because man has three powers. In modernity, these have become hopelessly confused. Cooperation is proper to economic life, for example, and competition is proper to cultural and artistic life. Men labour together. After work, they compete with songs and stories. This is all mixed up now. Economic life is fiercely competitive. We waste the best of our cultural and creative powers, our best art, on advertising. Our intellectual life is similarly mixed up with feelings, appeals to emotion, sentimentality. The solution is alchemical. Isolate the three parts, purify them, and reassemble them in their proper relationship. An alternative but not unwarranted natural history of Australia proposes that the continent was once far more lush and hosted an array of megafauna along with a very different flora. Over the long term, human habitation was not benign but had a disastrous impact. The megafauna and larger slow-moving animals were hunted out, leaving the continent without grazing ruminants, leading to the impoverishment and mineralisation of the soil. Worse, the main tool of indigenous hunters was fire. Reports from early European settlers described how the indigenous hunters might burn hundreds of acres of forest to round up a single kangaroo. Over some 50,000 plus years, this produced a fire-based ecology. Mountain ash and other temperate vegetation was replaced by a dryland eucalyptus monoculture with other species that depend upon fire for propagation. This is the real state of the Australian environment. Vast eucalypt forests that produce low rainfall and thrive on fire, with soil that has been subject to thousands of years of erosion and degradation. Over the last 50 or so years, we have witnessed a colossal failure of education. With deindustrialisation and the end of manufacturing, educators were given the task of reskilling the workforce. Their task, assuming that human beings are just sludge that you can pour into any shape you like, was to turn uneducated mechanics and factory workers into credentialed admin assistants and aged care workers. The plan failed utterly. All that happened was that educational standards dropped sharply, and for the most part re-skilling became confused with instilling woke values into deplorables. Worse, it became a self-serving industry. They could charge poor people large amounts to complete certificates in doing what they had always been doing, and then invented this rort called lifelong education. As it happens, it seems that, by nature, a great many people are not suited to abstract education or bullshit jobs, and find fulfillment working with their hands, making things. But in that case, it's an intractable problem. The entire objective of our technologies is to replace all manual labour, and more recently, mental labour too. The objective is to automate all production, ostensibly freeing man from drudgery. No amount of re-skilling and no electoral revolt by the Rust Belt can address the problems that creates, as human beings are reduced to nothing but unproductive consumers. It is much deeper than a merely educational problem.